Thank you for tuning in to SwitchMed Connect, where we have been exploring circular and sustainable businesses in the Mediterranean region. Today, we're looking at policy, or maybe more specifically, the relationship between business and policy. Perhaps something that's very obvious is that we need the public and the private sectors to work together to bring about this transition that we all want, which is a transition to a low-carbon, sustainable, circular, green economy. And you hear that over and over again at all the multilateral environmental negotiations and big events and conferences. It's sort of a mantra, and it makes sense. If we are to get everyone on board and fully empowered in their capacity, we can realize this shift. And that is where we have a chance to address around 50% of global greenhouse gas emissions just by changing the way that we produce and consume, which is so big and so important. So we really want to support that transition. We do have the evidence that this is starting to happen. We just recently at COP28 in Dubai, there was the absolute first time that the circular economy was literally inside of the negotiated text. And this was in reference to an approach. The circular economy was named as an approach to how it's possible to have a sustainable lifestyle or to make the transition to sustainable consumption and production. And that may not seem like a very big deal, but to get language into negotiated text is very, very, very big and important. Here in the Mediterranean region, there's also been momentum. In 2021, at the 22nd COP of the Barcelona Convention, contracting parties adopted regional measures. This was produced by SwitchMed program, and it actually helps to create the policies on the national level that support the green and blue businesses. And so that's really matching what we're seeing as the ambition on the global level to tools to implement that on the regional level. So today we have some really wonderful guests to join us in this conversation, really wanting to talk about how we can continue to provide enabling conditions through policy for businesses. So to help us explore a little bit further, I want to thank David Smith for joining us, and Antoine Karam from Lebanon is also joining us. Antoine, I want to introduce you. You were one of the original trainers of the green entrepreneurs in Lebanon and a seasoned international expert in development, management, and strategy. So with your extensive experience in providing strategic support to different international organizations and private sector entities, you are now, as I understand, the Middle East coordinator and Lebanon country director for Swisscontact. And Swisscontact is dedicated to empowering youth by providing coaching and training and helping unlock the potential to find employment opportunities. So simultaneously, Swisscontact supports the growth of small and medium-sized enterprises, contributing to the job creation and fostering economic development in developing and emerging countries. And David has a bit of a different perspective that you're bringing, and you're the president of a nonprofit consulting company, Water, Environment, and Beyond. And David, you have managed more than 30 projects on environmental studies across the globe for clients such as the European Commission, the World Bank, the Inter-American Development Bank, the Global Green Growth Institute, United Nations organizations, amongst many others. And as I understand, you were born in South Africa, and you've lived in Australia, London, Barcelona, Mexico, now back in Barcelona. And something that I also know about you, David, is that you really believe in the collaborative effort to make these important big shifts in the system to bring about this positive change that we've been talking about. And I'm looking forward to hearing from your specialized background in economic and social development with a focus on environmental management and water resources management, among the many other areas of specialties. So I appreciate you both for being here with us. since you both have such interesting backgrounds, I want to first give us a chance to kind of learn a bit more about your work. So perhaps, Antoine, you could start off and you could share with us a little bit about your experience in helping to develop the regional baseline assessment, which was then used to elaborate and create the set of regional measures that we talked about, and some of the work that you are doing.
Yeah, thank you, Tasha, for the nice introduction, and nice to meet you, David. So yeah, as you said, I started with SwitchMed back in 2015, and I was one of maybe the first actually people in this country to work under this great program around the Mediterranean Sea. My main focus over the years was more about supporting entrepreneurs and small businesses and small green businesses and green entrepreneurs in developing their green ideas, developing their green business plans, developing market studies, accessing finance, etc., etc. And back in 2019, I think, I also intervened under another component of this project, which was the policy component. So I supported the policy team to collect all the information about the policies in different countries around the Mediterranean Sea, policies that could present opportunities or actually challenges sometimes for green entrepreneurs in the region. My scope covered different countries, including Lebanon, Jordan, Palestinian territories, Egypt, Libya, etc., etc. So the idea was to collect all this information about policies and draw a baseline, right, for the development of a regional framework for policies that could support entrepreneurs, from which green entrepreneurs, if you want, can benefit if they want to launch their green business ideas. So as for my recent focus, as you said, I'm currently with Swisscontact, and our role is more to support small and medium enterprises to grow and create employment, and also to support youth to access the job opportunities in the market and the job opportunities created by these SMEs.
Thank you. No, it's really, as I was saying, it's really interesting for me to hear how close you are to the people that would be using the tools and the measures, and the way that the process to produce them has been so informed along the way by the important stakeholders. And I want to ask you, David, maybe you could share a little bit about your perspective. You've been recently switched over to being a nonprofit, which is a big change. And maybe you could share with us some of the experiences and the studies that you've been involved with.
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you, Tasha, for having us here today. And Antoine, the same for me. Great to meet you. It's fantastic that we can be here in Barcelona and you there in Beirut, and we're having a conversation between us. Yeah, we started out as a consulting company some 10 years ago, as a profit consulting company. And we made the move to change to a non-profit consulting company as a cooperative. And the reason for that change is that we saw changes happening not only globally, but also for our side as an SME. And these changes, we see that a lot more is now focused on giving back to society, making sure that society is working well within its own realms. And doing that as a private company, as an SME, it just didn't seem like it was making it work. And as a non-profit, essentially everything that we produce, any benefit that we have, gets put back into the company. And so that's not only allowing it to grow, but also allowing the employees to grow with new trainings, etc. So, but what are we focused on? We essentially are focused on the social and the business and the policy side of innovation within the scope of environment, and specifically with a focus on water. And this has allowed us to be in a position to do these types of studies across different regions, whether from a global standpoint or indeed from a Mediterranean and a local standpoint. So we've seen lots of changes happening, not only in this region from the first studies that we did, but also as we progressed through looking at different areas across the globe. we've seen a big shift towards green circular economy within this region. So yeah, really happy to explore some of these ideas further with you.
It's very interesting. One of the things that I think is interesting about both of your backgrounds is the way that you are able to be so close to the people who are affected by policy, the businesses, the youth, the stakeholders, and so that's really important. One of the things that we've been discussing throughout this podcast series, is how we can translate the transition. So I think that, we agree that we need a transition and we all need to make sure that we're sort of on the same page. So that's sort of my next question for you both, is whether you feel that there's a sense that we have a common vision in the Mediterranean, particularly about what a green transition is. And specifically, Antoine, I'm wondering if you could help with your perspective and how you see the transition that's taking place that we're actually inside of right now. We have the ambition and we're already seeing progress inside of this transformation in the region. But how do you think that it measures up to the global ambition?
I think there are many projects and things that are being implemented at different country levels around the Mediterranean, in the southern Mediterranean area. But maybe there's no unified vision about all these projects and initiatives. If you go, I don't know, to Morocco, for instance, or Egypt, they're currently having massive solar farms projects that are being implemented, like the Benban one in Egypt, and Noor solar farm in Morocco. So these are massive projects towards a clean transition, right? Clean energy transitions. However, I think it's really important also to keep in mind that these projects are not solely driven by eco-conscious. I mean, there are massive economic and social factors and strategic factors behind them also. So in order to reach an efficient transition, I think it's important to acknowledge this and to try to find this sweet spot between what makes sense really from an ecological perspective and green perspective, and what also makes sense on different levels, like from an economic perspective, or what makes sense also from a social perspective, etc., etc. You also have to keep in mind that these countries face a lot of challenges. So priorities may not align, right? I mean, you have a lot of wars, economic crisis, migration crisis in this region of the world. So, and these crises may not help in putting climate change on the front seat of government's priorities. I mean, it's really hard, and even on the individual level, I mean, it's really hard to go, for instance, and ask an SME to invest in a clean transition while they don't know if they will be bombed the next day, right? It's really hard to go and ask refugees or vulnerable populations to pay 10% or 20% more to buy agri-food while they're not even eating every day. Right? It's really hard also, I don't know, on the individual level, to ask someone who lost all his or her saving in the bank because of the economic crisis to go and invest in an electric car, invest whatever he or she still has in an electric car. So these challenges are not helping in putting climate change issues on the front seat. However, I think it's fair to say that many initiatives are being implemented. Some of them are at the government level. Some of them are at the individual level. This change varies from a country to another. In some countries, governments lead. In other countries, individuals lead. But in all cases, there are initiatives that are being implemented. What's missing is a more unified vision for all these initiatives that are happening.
I think this is really important, that one of the points that you're making is really important, is that we need to be aware of the world that we live in, right? So we can have these ambitions, we can have these ideas, but they need to be connected to what's actually happening in real time and informed by the people who are going to be affected by it. So I want to turn to you, David, and hear a little bit about your thoughts about, when we think of policy, the traditional concept is that it's a top-down. It's a top-down approach, that there's decisions made in the international or national level that affect businesses, communities, and individuals. But what is available in your view of how we can go also bottom up and how we can inform decision making from the actual experiences that are happening on the ground?
Yeah, perhaps I can say a little bit about what Antoine was mentioning before coming to this question, and I totally agree with his perspective and what you're saying there, Antoine, because essentially at the end of the day, there are a number of aspects that are creating a barrier to this real transition. And recently we've written a report on the green jobs and skills moving towards green circular economy in the Mediterranean, and we looked at a number of these factors. And it's not only the social factors that you've mentioned, but also climate factors. And the climate is changing, and of course it's bringing with it a number of different barriers and challenges that we have to try and get over in order to move forward in this transition. And we all know that the transition needs to happen. We need to be moving in this direction. In terms of having a common agenda or a common platform, and I think it's very interesting that you mentioned this point, Antoine, because they do exist. There are those common platforms, those common initiatives, specifically from entities such as the Union for the Mediterranean. There's an Interreg Med platform that actually exists for all these initiatives to be showcased. But if you are mentioning it, Antoine, it means that it's not very visual. It's not out there. It's not available to all of these SMEs that are working on the ground. And so this is obviously a very important point, that the communication around these initiatives needs to be a lot stronger, and to have these stories of success to be brought to the consciousness of all of those that are working in this area. Now, coming to your question, Tasha, about the idea of working with policy from a bottom-up approach. I think we've seen a lot of change over the last couple of decades. This idea that policy used to be a lot more top-down. This is what has to happen because this is good for our country, and this is the direction we're moving in. You got a lot of kickback from these types of initiatives or these types of processes that run. And I'll give you just an example. In Kenya, recently they'd put together a ban on single-use plastic bags. And this was a ban that essentially was a first across the continent. Being South African, I thought indeed we were the first to bring in bans on single plastic bag uses, but that was only at supermarket level. And that was back in the 1990s. But Kenya brought a ban across the entire country and all single-use plastic bags. But they gave a 2-year period for that to happen. What wasn't in place was communication together with the industry. What wasn't in place was financial support for those that are actually doing and producing the plastic bags. So this created a massive gap within the market. And so essentially when that law came in to say that you can no longer use a single-use plastic bag, in fact, if you are producing plastics, then your business will be shut down and the directors of that company can be fined or put in jail. If you are caught with a plastic bag out in the street, then basically you would be fined as well. So this type of measure resulted in companies going out of business because they had no other resource, no other way to actually sell their product, whether that's a juice in a plastic bag or a chicken with all its juices and sauces given to you in a plastic bag. And they moved towards sort of Hessian or weave-woven types of bags, where in Kenya they didn't have that as a industry, but Uganda did. So there was a massive boom in Uganda for these types of bags, and the international trade around that happened because Kenya didn't have all of those processes in place to make that transition. This type of lesson can definitely be learned when we look at the Mediterranean. Tunisia, for example, is since 2021 introduced the same idea, complete ban on single plastic bag usage. There was a lot of discussion around different industries, different civil society organizations, but it seems that it as well is stalling because it's needing the financial impetus. It needs to have that industry of woven bags taken over. It needs to have a replacement, essentially. And without that support, then it can stall and it can end up in a bit of a disastrous situation. So I think what are my policy approaches involving the entire sector that is being affected, and that is civil society, the businesses, as well as academia, and making sure that these policies are more inclusive and allow for that change to happen in a progressive but yet fair way.
Yeah, I think I appreciate you sharing with us in a specific example, because I think that it's very helpful when we're considering, the different dynamics of policy or how policy is created and rolled out, to have a look at what, like we've said, nothing speaks louder than an example or what the evidence is. And so we're looking at a specific thing that happened. And when we also know that there's an element to this discussion about the need to build trust. I think that in order for us to really realize the potential of a transition, there needs to be trust among the different stakeholders, from civil society and with policy and businesses. And so I want to kind of ask you, Antoine, you're very close with businesses and you've been working among the businesses and now the young people. What is your reflection in terms of the relationship between business and policy, or maybe how you perceive the way that businesses feel about policy?
Yeah, so first, I just want to say that I'm fully in line with what David said, and I think the example that he gave about in Kenya really illustrates how things can go wrong, right, sometimes. So to go back to your question, Tasha, as a general rule, businesses are not fond of policies, especially that most of them are coercive. So businesses usually apply policies because they have to. Otherwise, they get a fine or they may shut down their business. So as a general rule, they're not fond of policies, especially, as I said, because most of them are coercive. And this applies to all policies, right? I'm not talking specifically about green policies. I'm talking about policies in general. You can take any example, tax policies, right? Are businesses happy to pay taxes? I don't think so. Of course, one can argue that they have to pay taxes. They're happy to pay taxes to contribute to the country's revenues and all that. But you have tax havens in this world, and this is where businesses relocate when they see that they're paying a lot of taxes. So businesses in general are not fond of policies. I can give you maybe a more relevant example linked to green policies. If we take the CO2 emissions, right? If I'm taking about a very conventional business. I'm not talking about green businesses here, right? I'm talking about conventional businesses, which represent a big chunk of the businesses in this region. So let's say that I have an industry and I don't know, a policy dictates that I need to replace my filters every year, right? To invest $10,000 to replace my filters every year. Well, from a business perspective, if I'm a conventional business, again, maybe the return on investment may not be interesting for the SME from a pure business perspective, right? Why would this SME invest $10,000 to replace filters if this doesn't affect its production and sales from a pure business perspective? So from a business perspective, they may say, okay, let me just maybe keep these filters for one more year or for 2 more years or 5 or 10 or 50 more years, right? If we just look at it from a business perspective. But so yeah, to conclude, if you want, this is the general idea about policies. However, just like David said, there are different also types of policies that are more that give more incentives to the business, and I believe that these may be more efficient, especially in countries where policies are not automatically enforced. So pushing towards policies that are more for incentivizing businesses, I think may be more efficient than only pushing towards policies that are coercive for SMEs and businesses in this region.
Can I just jump on what
Absolutely, yes.
Antoine was mentioning? I 100% agree with this. No company wants to be in line with the policies that are being pushed upon it. Now, whether that is tax or the green policies or circular economy, whatever it may be. And this, I think, opens the scope for these participatory policy approaches, because in the end, if you're getting told you have to do this, or you have to, as Antoine mentioned, change your filters every 10 years, and you push it to 15 because it's no economic benefit for you, I totally get that. As a business, we've also been in that place of saying, okay, well, we got to make the numbers work. We got to make sure that my employees are getting paid at the end of every month. And if policies are getting in your way to make that happen, you, as any business would do, looks at ways of trying to make it work for your business so it keeps going. The way of getting around that and making sure that we are all aligned and moving in the same direction, because even businesses, even small businesses, they know that the transition to a green circular economy is the way to move forward. But it needs support. It needs to have an enabling environment. It needs to have the financing available. If you're wanting to make that switch and you say that you've got to change those filters, provide a financial incentive for that to take place. And then if the policies are being created, make them participatory. Allow the industry to be involved in what are these policies that are coming forward. And because the policy change now is affecting us for the next decade or longer. So rather let us all participate within this. And there's approaches, there's very innovative approaches, sandbox approaches to legislative changes, etc., where you create an area and you say, we are going to trial policy in this area and see what happens. Does it work? No, it doesn't. Okay, let's change that. Let's discuss with all the actors in the area and see how we can change that. Is it working now? It is. Okay, let's put that across the entire country. So there's ways of making it work, and it can happen. But we need to be able to engage with all the stakeholders in order for that to happen.
I think this is, brings us to something that's really important, which is the transition that we're talking about requires sort of an epic amount of creativity, right? We're talking about doing something that doesn't quite exist yet. And we're talking about, in the process of doing that, to continue to apply technology and innovation so that it can continue to evolve. And so I want to tune in a little bit to our imagination and our creativity and kind of take it a step further and ask you both about what you we know what we want as an end result, more or less. We know about the ambition. We know about some of the challenges that are maybe obstacles and some things that are with really good intentions, not quite plugging in and hitting the ground with complete success. I want to ask you both if you can reflect a little bit about what needs to happen to bring together or to marry the private and the public so that there can be enabling conditions, so there can be incentives like you shared with us, Antoine. And maybe you can go first, Antoine, and talk about tell us more about the idea of policy incentivizing business to make that progress for the green transition.
Yeah, I think in order to make this progress, we need to work on different levels. So maybe the first one being the classic policy level, where I would push more for, as I said, and as David just said, I would push more towards policies incentivizing businesses rather than being coercive. So, for instance, policies with that allow businesses to reduce their taxes if they do the right behavior, right? Or give them access to subsidized loans, for instance, if they want to do their green transition, etc. And then you have other levels. So you can work also on the market level. So policies that can allow SMEs and businesses to access specific market, to access big markets, right? Specific markets, if they do the good behavior. This also helps because in the end, businesses are there also to serve clients and to find new clients. So I think this helps a lot. We can also work on other levels, like the consumer level. I think this is very important. We need to educate consumers and spread awareness towards consumers, so they can themselves create this need for this transition, and businesses will follow. And finally, maybe the most important of all of these is to contextualize all this, just like also David said. I mean, the approach should be inclusive. Different stakeholders should be part of the process, so we can develop policies that will be applied even when they are not fully enforced by all governments.
I think that's also another really important point that you're raising. And when we're looking into the future to develop responsibly and to develop sustainably, obviously there needs to be meaningful engagement with young people. So maybe in this imagination game that we're kind of imagining here, how to bring together the public and the private, David, maybe you can share with us your ideas of the way that we can meaningfully engage young people and secure sort of the opportunities for them in this.
Yeah, I mean, first and foremost, I think the most important thing is when we're looking to the future, we must take stock of where we are right now. Yeah, even in an imagined future. And taking stock of where we are right now means that not everybody is at the same starting point. And this is very important to realize. Every country has a different path that they've taken to get to where they are right now. And it doesn't mean that we're all starting at the same point. So recognizing that some are more advanced and others are maybe needing a bit more assistance to get to that green transition is a very important point to start with, because then you can start to imagine what each of those different futures can look like. And we know that the voices of the youth are strong. We see this now, and we can see this over the last decade or so, that youth movements have been incredibly powerful and have made strong changes. One keen example is here in Barcelona. The End Fossil Now movement in Barcelona was actually a student movement that where the students occupied the campus for a full week, and they demanded that all of the first-year students that were coming in as undergraduates took a climate emergency course, and so that the university had to put together this course so that everybody is aware of what exactly is the challenges that we're facing. But they went a little bit further than that, and they said not only do the students need to have that education, but the professors as well. And so they made it sort of obligatory that all of the professors also had a climate awareness course, so that any of their subjects that they were teaching about had this climate awareness about it. And this movement really struck a chord across the Mediterranean, where different universities started picking up on how climate awareness, green transition can be brought into the university. So there's all sorts of different examples of exactly how the youth are creating that change. So how we can engage the youth, I would rather put it the other way around. It's let's see how we can talk to the youth that are engaging, that are already bringing in all of these changes, that are creating these movements, and then we see how we can adapt to what they're mentioning and how we can bring that into what policies we need to see across the region.
I think that's a really important shift in thinking. And I appreciate both of you for sharing your perspectives, because I think that what we're hearing is that we're inside of this transformation, and we're needing to be sure that we have the flexibility or the adaptive quality to continue to refine, so that we can create clear communication, so that we can empower through raising awareness, and that we can really bring in the experiences of the people who are going to be impacted, so that they can help shape the infrastructure, and they can help shape the enabling environment, and we can make it sort of fit for purpose. And so I very much appreciate you both for participating today. I think we've learned a lot. I want to let our listeners know that we're going to include in our show notes important links to resources as well as to our guests, so that you can continue to learn about them. And we will meet again in the next episode of SwitchMed Connect.